The late afternoon sun beat down on the bustling sidewalks, where pedestrians hurried over cracked concrete and car horns formed a steady backbeat to daily life. Neon signs buzzed for attention near high-rising towers of steel and glass, advertising everything from cyber cafes to noodle shops. Beneath peeling posters and graffiti-stained walls, Tessa Green studied the chaotic streams of humanity as she sipped a latte in front of a modest coffee shop. A junior reporter at the city's biggest newspaper, she had an eye for unusual stories, hidden in the metropolis's unending swirl of activity. Yet even she could not imagine the ancient magic and startling upheaval that would soon unfold in these streets. It all began with a strange man who stumbled into the city from an uncharted past. At first, Tessa barely noticed him. He looked like another street performer, perhaps, or a confused tourist. In a city like New Arcadia, where subways roared underfoot and drones zipped overhead delivering packages, odd sights were the norm. But this man wore robes of a texture she had never seen, embroidered with sigils that shimmered blue in the sunlight and seemed to hum whenever he moved or breathed. He looked around in absolute wonder, as though skyscrapers were towering gods. He seemed caught between awe and alarm, weaving through the crowd with cautious steps. His name was Arethus, though Tessa would not learn it until later that same day. That afternoon, she simply observed him from afar, attributing his elaborate attire to the city's love for the eccentric. She rose to leave, discarding her empty paper cup as she shouldered her messenger bag. As she turned away, she glanced back, only to witness the man pause in front of a traffic light, the embroidered sigils on his robes pulsing. The pavement at his feet quivered, and a crack travelled across the street. Tessa blinked in disbelief, telling herself it might have been a trick of the light or an overactive imagination. The man seemed just as startled, as if he, too, was unsure what had caused the sudden disturbance. Pedestrians paused, looking around to see if an earthquake was underway, then shrugged it off and continued their rush to their next destination. The crack was subtle, barely visible unless you looked closely. Still, Tessa's reporter instincts told her that something unusual had just happened, and she decided to keep her eye on the mysterious stranger. That night, New Arcadia's skyline was painted against the crimson backdrop of a smog-filtered sunset. Tessa rode an elevator to the newsroom on the 15th floor, where neon signs lit up the city below like a pulsing circuit board. Her desk was a clutter of half-written notes, an old camera, and empty coffee cups. She tapped her pen against a page in her notebook, replaying the afternoon's bizarre moment. Could a mere man cause the ground to crack? She questioned whether the event was even real. Perhaps the stress of chasing stories was taking a toll on her imagination? Yet she couldn't shake the memory of those shimmering sigils, nor the subtle vibration in the pavement. While her colleagues chatted about typical city crises, political scandals, corporate corruption, blackouts in the old district, Tessa dug for clues on anything remotely resembling what she saw. She typed phrases like mysterious robed man, strange symbols glowing, and unexpected ground fissure into her search bar. The results were unsatisfactory. Fleeting references to mythic conspiracies, an amateur blog about ancient runes, a few cryptic images from an archaeological expedition. One image caught her attention, a fragment of tapestry from an undisclosed excavation site. The swirling signs depicted on the tapestry looked eerily similar to the glowing shapes on the strange man's robe. Shaken by the similarity, Tessa saved the article, compiled her notes, and promised herself she'd investigate further in the morning. Meanwhile, across the city, in a deserted alley behind a row of shuttered shops, Arethus faced a predicament far more pressing than casual curiosity. He had arrived in this urban sprawl entirely by accident. One moment, he was fleeing the palace guard in his homeland, an ancient kingdom steeped in forbidden sorcery, and the next, he'd triggered a time travel incantation meant only for emergencies. It had hurled him forward centuries, maybe even millennia, into a future he did not comprehend. He tried to recall the incantation's commands. The swirling runes along his robe sparked in protest, attuned to an older era. He bent low, chanting under his breath, casting a pulse of arcane energy to anchor him. The attempt backfired. A hum began, low at first, then escalating into a buzz. A haze of light danced across rusted dumpsters and broken pavement. Arethus yelped as an unseen force rattled everything nearby. Windows on the far side of the alley shattered, glass raining down like 1,000 tiny daggers. His incantation had gone wrong. Or the new environment somehow corrupted it. He cut the spell short, breath ragged and heart-pounding. The air in the alley crackled with leftover magic, a swirl of violet sparks. Panicked, he dashed away, slipping into the nighttime crowds before anyone could trace the chaos to him. Yet the damage had been done, for the residue of that ancient spell seeped into the city's foundation, forging faint fractures that would soon spread. Early the next morning, Tessa was jolted awake by an urgent call from her editor. A number of store windows had spontaneously shattered overnight, mostly in a single block around the older part of town. Witnesses reported hearing a strange hum, almost like a chant, echoing in the alleyways. The police were investigating, but there was no sign of forced entry or vandalism. Tessa jumped at the potential connection. She tossed on a light jacket and sped out the door, her boots pounding the cracked sidewalks as police sirens wailed in the distance. She found the scene swarming with investigators, anxious shop owners and passers-by gawking at the shattered glass. The center of the incident was the exact alley Arethus had fled. Stray shards glimmered in the early sun, and an eerie hush settled over the area. Tessa noticed a faint scorch mark on a brick wall, arranged in a circular pattern that resembled the embroidered sigil she'd seen the day before. She snapped several photos, feeling the thrill of a journalist's discovery. Something extraordinary was afoot, and she was certain the robed stranger was involved. That afternoon, Tessa's story hit the digital front page. Though the piece was cautious, she lacked proof of a magical or supernatural cause, it still attracted attention, especially among fringe communities online. Forums buzzed with debates, referencing arcane symbols and alleged time travel theories. Some ridiculed the possibility, others were eager to believe. Amid the chatter, a private message landed in Tessa's inbox. It was from a user named Historius, who claimed to have knowledge about the kingdom from which Arethus might have come. The message read, "Your robed figure wears the sigils of the Aricathian monarchy. If he possesses time-waving abilities, your city is in danger. Meet me at Readmore Library after closing time. I can help." Despite her initial skepticism, Tessa sensed a lead. Readmore Library was an aging structure that stood in contrast to the glitzy skyscrapers dominating the skyline. An echo of times past. That evening she slipped in through a side entrance as instructed, only to realize that Historius was a slight woman in a fraying cardigan, her hair streaked with silver. She introduced herself as Dr. Rhea Song. A scholar of obscure histories, she led Tessa to a deserted reading room lined with dusty tomes. Dr. Song explained that the Aricathian monarchy thrived centuries ago in a place and era unknown to modern archaeology. Their lore spoke of advanced magic capable of traversing eras, yet the practice was banished within the kingdom, as tampering with the fabric of time threatened cataclysmic repercussions. "If Arethus is a renegade," Dr. Song murmured, "then there's no telling what spells he might unleash, inadvertently or otherwise." She slid a large volume across the table toward Tessa, the archaic text brimming with swirling symbols and references to time distortion. "We need to find him," she urged, quickly, before the resonance of his spells breaks down reality in places unprepared for such magic. Tessa felt an electric current of both excitement and fear. She had never been a believer in the arcane, despite growing up on fantasy novels. But the visible evidence was overwhelming. The fissures in the street, the shattered windows, the scorch marks matching these ancient runes. Guided by Dr. Song's research, Tessa found several mentions of a restoration incantation buried in the annals of Aricathian legends. An immense surging wave of energy, known as the temporal resequencer, could stabilize the rift if cast properly. However, the process called for specialized knowledge and, most of all, the cooperation of the mage responsible for breaking the timeline in the first place. While Tessa and Dr. Song devised a plan, Arethus roamed the city, confusion mounting with each passing day. The chaos he brought in his wake grew harder to hide. On his first night seeking shelter, he had channeled a minor warming spell in a deserted park to protect himself from a freak cold snap. The resulting energy surge caused nearby lampposts to spark wildly and knocked out power to several city blocks. Yet he remained frightened and lost, not malevolent. Each of his magical attempts seemed to misfire under modern conditions, spurring catastrophes that threatened New Arcadia. He couldn't speak the local language beyond a few halting words and found himself an outsider wherever he wandered. She stayed in contact with Dr. Song, who occasionally slipped her an archaic manuscript or a rumor of unexplained phenomena. The two shared a solemn bond, having witnessed firsthand the collision of eras. They knew the city's unspoken truth, that even in a world of subways and skyscrapers, magic could exist, reverberating through the cracks that formed when timelines overlapped. And while Tessa continued her journalistic pursuits, reporting on corruption, celebrating local heroes, highlighting cultural festivals, she carried within her an enduring secret, a deep awareness that reality itself could be shaped by forces both modern and ancient. Perhaps one day she would tell the full story. Perhaps she would wait until the city was ready for the notion that its foundations once trembled under the weight of a rogue incantation. For now, she was content to walk those busy streets, time-broken yet resolutely whole, remembering that behind the mess of urban chaos lay a delicate tapestry of possibilities woven from threads older than any skyscraper. And somewhere, across the vast expanse of centuries, an exiled mage might be walking through a palace hallway, the glowing sigils on his robe finally at peace, no longer time's unintentional harbinger of chaos.